said that reading makes you more empathetic, that it's a way to escape your own life. It can take you to faraway lands. It can put you into other people's shoes. It keeps your brain healthy, it reduces stress, it helps you sleep, and it can inspire you. In today's show, we're going to find out how In a Heartbeat, the miracle of a family that was meant to be, can inspire you. It's a beautiful true life story of how it doesn't take biology to create a family and the law of attraction. Don't go away. We'll be right back with more on our author today, Mikki Shepard. If you're just joining us, welcome to Books with Bridgetti. I'm your host, Bridgetti Limbrander from Cape Town in South Africa, and our live stream is made possible by Shepard and Live Media, help you make meaningful connections. This is an audience-centric show, and I am monitoring the comments, so please feel free to say hello. And with that, I'm going to give a huge big shout out as we open the show to Kathy, who's watching us over on LinkedIn, and also to Tish, who's watching us over on Amazon Live. A huge, big welcome to the show, and that's what we do. If you're new to the show, tell us that you are new. Anyway, let me know that you're new, and we would love to give you a shout. Today, our featured author is Mikki Shepard, and we are going to be having amazing conversation about how it doesn't take biology to create a family and the law of attraction. This show is brought to you by Live Media and StreamYard, and in able to do what I do, I use the Logitech Brio camera and also Samsung Studio condenser microphone. So if you are watching the show over on Amazon Live, you will notice that that the things that's in the carousel. And I have a bunch of books that I've also put in the carousel. I hope you can see that without a glare. So there's a ton of books. I've kind of got a problem at the moment in that my Kindle's already full of all these various books that you can see in the carousel. I don't know what to do with where I'm going to put any more books. I'm going to have to buy a new memory stick or something. I've already tried to clear my bookshelf behind me because it was just overflowing, and I thought I just need to, have a couple of books on there. It was just too much books. But anyway, I guess that's a nice problem to have, because apart from this show, Books with Bridgetti, I've also been hosting the Writers' Corner live show, and that's been running for over three years. So you can imagine how many authors and books has been highlighted in over 3 years. But it's a nice problem to have. So my featured author today is Mikki Shepard. She writes and speaks about educational marketing presentations for her clients. She hosts seminars for real estate, amongst other things. And more recently, what she talks about very, very passionately is the book we're going to focus on today in the show, which is called In a Heartbeat, the miracle of a family that was meant to be. The book is based on a true story about the loving choice of adoption and how it doesn't take biology to create a family and the law of attraction. So with that, let me give a very warm welcome again to you, the audience. If you're watching us on Facebook, on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitter or on Amazon Live, a warm welcome to all of you as well. And so without any further ado, let's say welcome to Mikki. Mikki, welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you were able to join me today because this is such an amazing topic, one that there is a lot of confusion about still. Um, and I think, conversations like these are necessary to dispel myths. So can we start off with your story? Um, how did how were you first introduced to this idea that it doesn't take biology to have a family, that you shouldn't feel less than? Because I think that's a lot of bullying occurs in the world, sadly, because this very fundamental concept of family is not understood in the way that it should be.
No, it isn't. It isn't. And it's something, you live something your whole life and sometimes you don't identify it. And the whole concept of it doesn't take biology was there my whole life without me really thinking about it. My grandmother's husband had passed away. His brother's wife had passed away. So the two of them got married. And so all of a sudden my mother had 4 siblings that she hadn't had the day before they got married. They were cousins, but now they were siblings. And then they years later, actually on the day my mother got married, they adopted, my grandmother and grandfather adopted a child. It was an orphanage in Staten Island. And absolute favorite aunt in the world. She lives in Vermont. And but it was never stepchildren or step parents. And so that's how I grew up. They were just there. It was what we had. And but then later on, one of the most significant things to me personally anyway was my mother got remarried when I was 12 and brought a man into our lives that I didn't know. And in my opinion, as a 12-year-old, it was always me and mom, against the world. And all of a sudden this man came into my life and was determined to become my friend. And I didn't want to have anything to do with him, but he worked at it. And that a lot of how he went about that really made me realize that being a parent had nothing to do with biology. He wasn't my biological father, and yet he was going to be a dad. And he was the best. And which is why my last name is Shepard, because I adopted him. And so, you fast forward, I had a brother that came into our lives. He was best friends with my other brother. His name was Chet Holmes. He has since passed away, but he was a best-selling author. And when you're first confronted with people that are now part of your life and you're not sure how you feel about it, that's how we were. But again, through a lot of love, and in his case, spending a lot of time with my son, even though we lived 3,000 miles away, we finally got together. And it was my brother. It wasn't my stepbrother. It wasn't, it just, those words were never used. I was just talking to somebody the other day who's adopted, and he was telling me the same thing, that people didn't do that. So I'm moving right along. I went in the Air Force, and my roommate in the Air Force had, quote unquote, a stepfather. She blamed everything that ever went wrong in her life on him being there. And I, on the other hand, was crediting everything good that had ever happened to my dad. And it was such a different mindset, but I obviously had somebody who worked hard to be a dad. So then later in life, my husband and I really wanted to have a baby. We tried everything, including a trip to Hawaii. Fun trip, no baby. And then I was going to read this, just a little paragraph that will help your audience understand what I'm talking about. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely. Go for it.
Okay. It says, "In a heartbeat," quotations was my reply. I was touring San Antonio, Texas on a trolley car with my friend Carol, and we passed several children along the way. She asked me if after all Carl and I had gone through to have a baby, would we ever consider adoption? And my reply was, "In a heartbeat." That conversation took place on April 5th. I'm sorry, that's not the day it took place. It took place in February 1988. On April 5th, 1990, we got a phone call. And the phone call said that I'm a friend of Carol's, and I have a friend who decided this morning she wants to put her baby up for adoption and wants to know if you want him. And that call came into my husband, who went into shock and called me right away to find out, who's Carol? I said, it's my friend in San Antonio. And he said, well, she has a friend who has a friend. You need to call them right away. And I did. And it turned out there was so much that had gone on that we didn't know about. 19 days later, I was in the delivery room, and it was so beautiful. Nerve-wracking as can be. Because, you always have that what if as a adoptive parent. What if she changes her mind? What if? But she was feeling very strong about this decision. She had planned to have an abortion, and then she started bleeding, and very typical, at least back then, of people in that situation, they didn't go to a doctor. So she just thought she miscarried and went on with her life until all of a sudden it became incredibly obvious to her that she was having a baby. She took it as a sign from God. She said she decided that God was giving her another chance to do something good with her life. And I'm so grateful. So that's the law of attraction was all in there. I'll tell you a little law of attraction story, and then whatever you'd like me to talk about. But the birth mother had gone to Texas, and she was staying with an old friend. She was trying to get away from her abusive current live-in friend. And so she went there, and then she decided to go back and try to make things work out. On her way back, she got stuck in a traffic jam in Dallas. And she's telling me this story in the labor room, if you will. And I said, in Dallas, when was that? And she said, this past November. I said, oh my God. And she said, I said, what was causing the traffic jam? And she said, oh, I'll never forget, because they said that President Bush was there for some meeting, and that Mick Jagger was in the nearby hotel. And so everybody was moving at the same time. And I said, oh my God, Sharon, President Bush was there to see the realtors, and I was attending the realtor convention. The hotel you were in front of, because she said, I got stuck in front of this pink hotel. And I said, oh my God. And she said, yeah, there were Secret Service people up on the roof. I said, that was my hotel. And everything had been put at a halt because Mick Jagger was there, and he was checking out with his many, many people. And they were also, Secret Service was everywhere to get the president across the street to the convention center. It was my hotel. And she said, see that? Even back then, CJ was working his way to you. And so, that was November 1989 that this traffic jam happened. And April 24th, 1990, I became a mom. And it was all working its way there along the way. Even the day he was born, I was at another realtor convention in Washington, D.C., and I'm rushing through the airport because she had called my husband and said my water broke. And my husband has a property management background, so he said, call a plumber. But always the joker, And he said, you call a plumber, I'll call Mikki. And he called me. So we got me on a flight, and I'm running through the airport going, I'm having a baby. And the guy pulling my luggage is going, I need to know your secret so I can tell my wife when I get home. You're too skinny. So I was calling the hospital from the airports. And then when I got there, there was a lady there that said, have you been calling me from airports all day? The receptionist. And I said, yes. And she said, calm down. There's no baby yet. And told me where the room was. And I went up there. Turns out that they wanted to send her home because labor had stopped. And she told the nurses, I can't leave. Baby's mother won't know where I went. They didn't know what was going on. So it was, there's so much, that, it's a tearful, happy story. All the little stories that go into it. But overall, it's the most wonderful story I've ever lived. And I would love to have other people have that feeling, that maybe somebody who's been wanting a child, or somebody who's not sure about the child they're having, So that's my little snippet.
Mikki, there's so many things that you mentioned while sort of telling your story that I don't even know where to start picking up on. But I did love that you said you chose your dad. You know, he came into your life when you were 12 years old. You chose him because you told his name, and it was beautiful and also touching that you mentioned that even though it was you and your mom, and you didn't have a dad, up until that point.
Right.
And so when this person came into your mom's life, you were kind of like, who are you? But he was determined to win your heart, and he kept at it until you loved him to the point where you wanted to have him as your dad. I
Yes.
think that is just amazing. Amazing. And something else I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, that personally touches my heart as well, is that we have this thing about referring to family as, step this or step that, or adopted this or adopted that. And possibly by our language, we are skewing
Yes.
what family is all about. The person's either your brother or your sister, or they're not.
Exactly. They're not a half brother or a half sister either. I don't know where you find half
And
people.
I don't know why people seem to kind of want to emphasize that somehow.
Yes.
It's my half brother, my half sister, my adopted mother, my adopted child. So why do we want to place so much emphasis on that, and not the human dynamic of, this is part of my family. This is my family.
Right.
Um, you know, and I wanted to just raise also and just get your, a sense of how you would address this. A very good friend of mine adopted two children when they were tiny. They were little toddlers, and for all intensive purposes, she's their mom. She's raised them. They're teenagers. I think that her daughter's out of school now. Um, but she somehow feels, and people make her feel like she's not a real mum because she didn't give birth to them. What would you, Mikki, want to say to people who say things like that?
Hey, it's disheartening because you just, I'm sure she felt like I felt. This is the most wonderful thing that ever happened, and to be able to have create your own family. And like I say,
A
biology has to play
family
a
by
role,
a
but it's
family
not
by
there.
design. I'm
Right.
just thinking while you're talking, I'm thinking that family by design. You
Yes.
chose to have you made a conscious decision that this is what you want.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you how I would address it. I would tell her a story, a true story. And there was a day. It was actually many years ago. My son was 5, and I was asked to write an article, which, by the way, was named In a Heartbeat. It became the book a whole bunch of years later, but I did write it. And the day I was supposed to go to the newspaper, we lived in Colorado, and it was a Women of the West special they were doing, and so they wanted different women to write stories. And I'm getting ready to leave, and my son goes over and he put his hands on the door to block the door. I mean, 5. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Shouldn't I be in the picture?" I said, He said, "Well, the story's about me, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Honey, just when it comes out in the Sunday paper, your friends at school's parents are going to read it, and I don't want anything to ever hurt you because of something that was so wonderful that happened to us." And he said, "I know what adoption means." I said, "Okay, what does it mean?" He said, "It means I'm special." And he was in the picture. And he never felt any different. But I think it's back to my education thing. And your friend had a wonderful experience. She's a special person. to adopt. Her children got a life they probably wouldn't have had. And we got to get away from talking about, the how that everybody came into your life, and just talk about your family. It's your family. And, I mean, the reason my son knew early on was because I never wanted to have one of those awkward moments. I'm not good at it. And I just thought he needed to know from day one. We were proud of it. We wanted him to be proud of it, but not dwell on it. It's just there. But I didn't want to have a day when we have to have some strange conversation. And the second part for your friend was a conversation. My son was very into Free Willy when Free Willy came out. I think he'd say I was really the one into it, but we were watching the movie for like the 100th time one night, and he turned to me and he said, do you remember Mama? And I said, remember what? And he said, remember when I was in your belly? And I said, honey, is my husband backing out of the room, wondering what I'm going to do? And sometimes you just have to let the words come from wherever they're coming from. And they did. And I said, no, honey, remember, you were never in my belly, but you were always in my heart. And
oh my gosh, that is so beautiful.
And he turns around and goes, oh, that's right. And we went back to watching the movie. But those are the two things for your friend.
But that speaks to also how you share information that's age appropriate.
Right. Very good. Yeah.
Because sometimes people feel that they need to go into a long, detailed explanation with a child, and often the child doesn't need that. Often just a one-liner will do, and then they're happy because they just wanted something from you, not from other people, from you. And sometimes we overcomplicate it. It's like when a child asks, Mom, where do I come from? Like just in the and then you're kind of like, oh my goodness, where do I begin? It doesn't have to.
True.
They'd very often be happy with just a one-liner, and off they'd skip,
Yes.
But we try and overcomplicate things more than it actually needs to be.
Very true.
And I mean, your son sounds amazing. He sounds like he's just a beautiful, beautiful person, and the fact that I really like, now I understand why, because I always ask authors, how did you come up with the title? And you've already told us, like, this is the story of how I came up with the title, and I think it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and so I know that you sound like you've got an amazing relationship with him.
Okay.
What has it been like for your husband to love him as a father? How has that relationship worked out?
Very well. Very well. He was, I flew so I could be in the delivery room, and he, of course, was in Colorado Springs because we were advised that somebody should stay behind and get things rolling. And the night my son was born, I went back to the hotel to call him, to tell him, you're a dad. And he sounded so out of breath. And I said, what are you doing? He said, it's raining, but I'm planting a tree. I said, why are you planting a tree in the middle of the night? And he said, I don't know. He said, I just always told myself if I ever had a child, I was going to plant a tree. And he did. And he couldn't wait for us to come home. And there were a lot of complications about doing that, but we did 2 days later. And he ran through the airport. And I used to say it was like O.J. Simpson in the Hertz commercial, but his name has changed meaning. So he just was so excited. But we got home, and he just laid down and held JT for the longest time, and they were bonding. And he used to call it his 3 a.m. bonding. He'd get up and feed him at 3 a.m. My son, we moved to Arizona when my son started first grade, and in first and second grade, my husband, I forced him to retire for a little while. And so he did. So he went on all the school trips, and he did all that. They rode their bikes to school every morning. They were great. They went hiking. They do all the things. I'm not a big hiker, but they do all the outdoor things. And even my husband's very into gardening. My son took that up along the way. He hasn't lived at home in 7 years, I think. And things that he planted still come up every year. And my husband can't wait to point them out to me. See, JT planted that, and so they have a lot in common, and they have a good relationship. But it's the same thing. We were older. Maybe that had something to do with it. We weren't kids, and we were determined to spend as much time with this child as we could. Because I'll tell you what, somebody told me right after he was born and he was hiccuping, and we have a video of him hiccuping for 45 minutes. And the guy who took the video said, someday you'll be glad you have that, because you're not going to believe how fast this will go. And
time goes by very quickly.
It does.
The time goes by so quickly. So Tish over on Amazon Live says, some who've been adopted do feel like their adopted parent had become more of a parent than those who gave them up. And she says, I suppose that depends on the circumstances. But it's, that's what we've been talking about, is that, you don't have to be a biological parent to become or to be a real parent to anyone. And we do want to dispel the myths around that. When we come back, we're going to take a very short break. When we come back, I'd like to know from you what motivated you to writing In a Heartbeat.
Okay.
Almost 3 billion people in town. So, Mikki, a lot of people have gone through life, and not everyone has got such an amazing story as you have with your family, but not everyone wants to write their story. Why did you want to write your story, and why do you want to share it with the world? I think it's wonderful. I think it's so necessary. But what motivated you to want to share your amazing story with the rest of the world?
I originally, when I was much younger, I wanted to write a book about it didn't take biology to become a parent, because I really wanted to talk about the relationship with my dad. And years went by, but after my son was born, every time I told little parts of the story, because we found it amazing, people kept saying, you have to write this down. And my husband kept saying that. He says, there's so many little parts of this that only you know, and everybody else hears about it. You should write it down. And when I got a chance to write an article, that article that I mentioned, and when I did, that was my idea. In fact, it even says in the article that I planned to write this book. It just took over 20 years. But when we adopted, all the news you heard about adoption at that time, you kept hearing bad stories, sad stories. And we kept thinking that somebody's got to tell a good news adoption story, because we know there's many, but they all haven't been written about. And we decided to. And even when the book got accepted by the publisher, at the last minute, I thought about changing the names. And ironically, my son called. He called because he knew that was the day I was going to email the manuscript to the editor. And he called and he said, did you hit send? I said, no, not yet. I said, I'm thinking, and I'm talking with your dad about maybe we should change the names. And he said, I think that's a good idea. I said, okay. I said, why didn't you say something sooner? He said, because you have wanted to get this story out for as long as I've known you, and I wasn't going to step on that dream. But if you could change the names, that would be okay too. So I did. But I felt that then. I feel it now. I think people need to know there's a good news story. People need to know that there are a lot of myths about this that have nothing to do with anything. Quickly, I had a very dear friend who also adopted. We hadn't seen each other in years, and then all of a sudden we wound up seeing each other, and we became partners in a business. And when we moved to Arizona, she and her husband moved to Arizona. And one day, a while later, their child was much older than ours, and he started getting into trouble. And she was talking to me about it, and I said, "So what are you going to do about it?" And he, there's got to be a way to help him. And she said, "Nothing I can do." "What do you mean it's nothing you can do?" She said, "It's in his DNA. I can't change that." I said, "What?" "It's not in his DNA. He's been with you since the minute he was born. You're his parents. This didn't come from some unknown person from 15 years ago." But that was their attitude. And that became one of my big myths. I don't believe that. And I grew up with it. I never thought anybody that was my aunt and uncle wasn't anything but my aunt and uncle. I mean, it just wasn't anything different. And we certainly have never done anything that we know of to make, keep reminding my son, "No, you were adopted." It's not a bad word. It's a good word because it means you were chosen.
I like that point. I like that point very, very much. And I think that's what we need to change is the negative connotation to the word adoption. And yes, there are sad instances where adopted families hasn't worked. One wants to acknowledge that. But by the same token, not every adoption is the same. And there are beautiful adoption stories like yours that are truly, truly beautiful. And I think what we want to do is to drown out those bad stories and buy good ones. So that gives other children the opportunity to become part of a beautiful family. And to say to them, if somebody says to you, you're adopted, rebut that with saying, yes, I'm chosen. My mom chose me. My dad chose me.
Right. Right.
And so they can say that proudly. And so
Yeah, it should be.
I think it's also the vibe that you as a parent give to your children. Do you make them
Mm-hmm.
doubt themselves or do you make them feel secure in that, this is a real family. This is not
Right.
this is not an abnormal, the fact that we're an adopted family doesn't make us an abnormal family. We're still a family. So we want to change that narrative, I think, and you do that beautifully with this book.
Thank you. Thank you. I do. It's important. Not all families, biological families, have everything perfect, and and
No,
and so it's kind of the same thing. Everybody has their ups and downs. Everybody has their problems, but don't blame it on how you became a family. Just fix it. Just work on it together.
I think that's an important statement as well. You know, and if we want to fix it, if there's something wrong in the family, whether it's a biological family or an adoptive family, it's all in the
Right.
mindset. If we want to fix it, we'll find ways of fixing it. But
Yeah.
we live in this throwaway society, where you know a, a problem comes along. Okay, let's have a new. I'll have a new husband. I'll have a new wife. I'll have a
Right.
new family. It's like we have this throwaway society where we don't want to fix things.
Exactly.
Um, and it's just amazing what can happen if we have the right mindset when it comes to family life. Can I ask you to read your favorite passage out of the book? I would just so love it if you could.
Well, that was sort of it, the one I did, but I have others. So let me. This is actually on the book, but it's in the book as well, and it says most people have heard of affirmations, visualization, and the law of attraction. Many have embraced the concepts to attract goals into their lives. Many others don't believe in the concept and often treat it like hocus pocus, luck, or that it is what it is. Joe Vitale has talked about this in his book Miracles. And one of the things he said really got my attention. Whether you believe in law of attraction or not, it's still taking place in your life. He said you don't have to believe in gravity either, but if you jump off a building, you're going to go splat. And it just, that really hit me because it's true. We attract everything in our lives. I really believe that, good or bad, but acknowledge it. You know, there's a reason. I mean, I've always believed there's a reason for everything. My mother used to say, and it is, we attract things. So why not, if you know you're attracting things, maybe start concentrating on it. Maybe start thinking of the things you really want to attract. It's like whatever it is. I mean, people talk about, I'll never make enough money. Well, if you keep saying that, yeah, life's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Write yourself a good life or order up the one with all the disappointments. You're going to have disappointments anyway, so why not strive for the stars in the meantime?
Absolutely. So, Mikki, Tony Robbins has written you a review. His review says, "Heartbeat is the perfect recipe for achieving goals in life, with a dash of humor, inspiration, and tenacity, simmering with positive thinking and the law of attraction. It's the meal for those savoring love and happiness in all areas of life." Now, how did you get Tony Robbins to review your book?
I asked. To be honest, my brother that I mentioned that passed away, he and Tony Robbins were partners for 3 years before he died. And they had Business Breakthroughs International. I actually worked for the company, but it wasn't not like I had day-to-day contact with Tony by any means. I met him a few times. But last summer, I sent him an email, and I just asked, would you do a favor for Chet's sister? And I told him about the book and that, like him, I'm sure he still couldn't believe that he was gone. And so it was a very simple request. I just asked and hoped and prayed a lot. And I didn't hear anything. I think it was August a year ago. And it wasn't until just before Thanksgiving, I got an email from his assistant saying, Tony asked me to say this, and it said, "It was so nice to hear from you again. Can you write some ideas that I could look at and change or improve?" And I was as excited about that as I was the day I found out the book was going to be published, and grateful, because I know he doesn't endorse a lot of books, and in fact, I went to a national publicity summit last December, and the actual quote that you just read arrived in my email right before our final meeting that night, and we had gotten back together to find, and the man who put it on, his name's Steve Harrison. He said, so, hopefully everybody had this great week, and anybody want to share anything? And I jumped in right away. I said, it doesn't really have anything to do with this week, but I can't stand this. I have to tell somebody. And he even said, because he's produced a lot of books, he's worked with Jack Canfield, and a lot of well-known authors. And he said, I've never known anybody that got Tony Robbins to say yes. And I said, well, I am forever grateful, because it does mean a lot to me for a lot of reasons, but it was so special, and I really appreciated him doing it. And I love the words. So sometimes.
But it also goes to show how, you should never hesitate to ask. Because sometimes we don't get things simply because we don't ask.
Exactly.
People may think things and they think, well, I can never ask so-and-so. But you'd be surprised if you just asked how many people would say yes. And
Yes.
Don't beat about the bush. People are busy. If you want
Right.
something, tell them, this is what, can you do it? And What is the worst thing anyone say? Really? What is the
No.
worst thing? Exactly. So why are we so afraid to ask? And you got a yes, and an amazing yes, and an endorsement from someone like Tony Robbins is massive. And as you said, he doesn't endorse a lot of books, but he's endorsed your book. That
Yes.
means a lot. It also me tells me how he has obviously valued the relationship he had with your brother.
Yes.
It
Yes.
was special to him, that meant a lot to him, and that is why he took the time, the effort to endorse your book. And I think that is special, and it speaks volume about who he is as the kind of person that he is. I want to
Mhm.
shift gears just a little bit and talk more about the actual publication of the book. So we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the publication of the book. So, Mikki, I want to ask you, getting your story written is one thing, then designing the cover, deciding if you want to self-publish, if you want to publish traditionally, finding an illustrator. Those are other things that's sort of in the process, and then there's the marketing.
Yes.
so tell us a little, so tell us a little bit about how you decided on the cover, how you decided on an illustrator, how you decided on a publisher.
Well, I contacted publishers along the way when I was writing it, and um, there was this one woman that I talked to. It actually wound up being for 2 years, and I just every time she'd call me and she said, "So, are you ready to have us look at it?" And I said, "Not yet. Hang in there with me." And she said, "I'm not pushing. When you're ready, you let me know." And so, um, I had another brother that came into our lives. He was my dad's son from another marriage. He and I were exactly the same age. He was a couple months older than me, and he died in 2018. On the way back from his memorial, I couldn't get it out of my head how unexpected this was, and that we are the same age. And I thought, when am I going to finish this? So I did. I finished it, and I called this woman. And the way their publisher worked was they submit your manuscript to their board. It's a 5-member board, and if 3 of the 5 come back thinking they want to do it, they'll do it. 5 out of 5 came back with a yes. And so it was incredibly exciting. So they actually had the editor, they had the illustrator, but the cover was my concept. They turned it into reality. The butterfly is very significant to me because the butterfly was my brother Chet. And the reason I believe that is after he passed away, I've had white butterflies following me around. And for the longest time, even up to as of only a couple of days ago, if I step out on my deck, the white butterfly kind of comes by. And it's October. But I just believed he's been out there watching over me. And the people on the bottom, it was because people come in and out of our lives. There's an old saying about everybody comes into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And so the people fading back and forth from the pictures, it's because of all the people that have, come in and out of our lives. And honestly, Victor David Hansen, he's a writer, and he works for Hoover. Anyway, he wrote a book called A Case for Trump, and I haven't even read it yet. I bought it for my husband, but the cover was so striking with the gold on white, the gold letters. So I sent a copy of the cover to my publisher, and I said, I want the butterfly, but I like the color scheme. And so that's that's what they went with. And I thought they did a great job. I mean, I was thrilled when I first saw the cover, and because it pops, it does get people's attention. I just need to get it in front of more people. That's the plan. So the marketing part, I mentioned to you earlier, I have something exciting coming up in January, and hopefully that'll get the word out to a lot of people. And being with you today.
Well, I mean the cover is striking and it's beautiful. And I always like to ask authors, how they decided on the cover, because I think it's always such a special experience. Because I was looking at your facial expressions as you were telling the story, because that tells me a lot. There's a special relationship between the author and the publisher and the illustrator. Just getting what because you envision something in your mind that your
Yes.
cover is going to look like, but how do you get that out of your head into someone else's mind so that they can do something that visually represents what you only see in your mind's eye? I mean, to me, that is just, it gives me goosebumps when I think of that process, and when I look at an author and they say, I love the cover of my book,
Yeah, I do.
it's just what I imagine. So, I always like to look at authors' expressions on their faces, because it tells me a lot about how they feel about the process of doing things. What has the marketing been like for you so far? I know that you've got something very exciting that's on the horizon in future, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
But, when did you start your marketing process? Because this is another interesting thing. I've spoken to a lot of people, and I think there's a lot of education, especially for new authors. I spoke to someone just recently who is a marketing professional. In fact, more than one person. They were saying, a lot of authors wait until the book is published, and now they think, oh heck, now I've got to sell the book. But marketing is a dance. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yes.
And so, the encouragement, or marketing specialists always say, when you start writing a book, it's time to market it well before you go to the publisher. So that people have something to look forward to. So as you tell the story, by the time it's published, people must be saying, yes, I want a copy.
That's true. No, that's true. Once I knew it was going to be published, I did start talking to anybody who would listen to me. And ironically, I live in a very small town. And in the, I think it was Mother's Day, we had just we had a family gathering. We were on our way home, and we drove through the town. And I looked over and I'm going, when did we get a bookstore? I don't remember us having a bookstore. And it turned out that weekend is when we got it. That's why I had never seen it before.
Oh, wow.
So I went to see the guy. He's a professor at a local college, and it's a used bookstore. And I went in and I said, when did you open? Because I come into town every day and I haven't seen this. And he said, just this weekend. He said, we have all these books at our house, and we just decided we were going to start a bookstore. And I said, well, I have an idea for something mutually beneficial if you're open to it. And by then I had a picture of the cover that I have it on my phone, so I can show it to anybody who is willing to look at it. And I said, would you do a book signing for me? And keep in mind, I never met this man before, and I told him where he could buy books. I don't know. It just seems like what you're supposed to do. And he did. And so that summer we had a book signing, and it was great. It was so nice. But in the meantime, then I was at my dentist, and they all knew I was writing a book. And so at the end, I'm showing them the cover. I'm getting all excited about it. My dentist comes back out to see what the excitement's about. And then there's this lady standing next to me, and I finally thought, oh my God, I'm being so rude. She's trying to pay her bill, and I'm in her way. And so I apologized, and she said, no, I'm standing here because I'm listening. Would you come to I said, oh, okay. And she said, I belong to a book club, and it's the Retired Teachers of Pine Bush Book Club. would you come and speak?
Wow.
And once the book comes out. So it's absolutely. And so again, we did that in the summer. Everybody who came that day, I didn't know how long they wanted me to talk. And I just kept watching the body language, And so I wound up talking for an hour, and everybody bought a book. But then they came up with stories. I mean, one lady came up to me and she said, "You don't remember me, but I was your son's teacher." And and he could always hold his own in conversation. I said, "Well, he was around adults from day one, And then somebody else came up to me and said how she was buying the book for herself, but she was buying a copy for her daughter because her daughter and son-in-law have not been able to have a baby. And the son-in-law is very against the idea of adoption, and she doesn't really understand why. She said, "I think he needs to read your book." So that's my mission, one person at a time. If I can get to one person at a time. And so that's pretty much what I do. I mean, anywhere I go, I start talking about the book. I did attend, I was on a couple of radio programs this summer, and which were so wonderful. And then there's, I did attend this National Publicity Summit last year, and that was great because I got to meet 75 producers of, TV, radio, and print media. And so a lot of it got stalled during COVID because nobody wanted to talk about adoption. Everybody wanted to talk about COVID. And that was when I was really geared up to have the real marketing go off. But, it's falling on deaf ears at that time. So it got postponed. So this year it's been more ongoing. And then can I mention my podcast? Is that okay?
Yes, do. Yes, you do.
I told you before we met or earlier today that, I'm excited because it's just happened. Yesterday I signed a contract, and I will be hosting a new podcast on Voice America, and it will start on January 24th. And the brother I told you about who passed away unexpectedly, and that's why I decided to finish my book, that's his birthday. There are all these dates, and that goes back to my law of attraction. These things just keep, if you look at them, you kind of have to pay attention to it. And so I'm really excited because it's a 13-week pilot. I'm hoping to get the word out to a lot of people, hoping to interview a lot of people who get their stories, not just listen to me for an hour every week. We want to hear from other people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, we really want people to be able to handle or share their stories because we learn from what we hear and read and see. So I'm hoping.
Well, congratulations. I think that is going to be amazing. So with your permission, I'd like to reach out to my friend that I referenced earlier on in the interview.
Please do.
And ask her whether she would like to be a guest on your show. I'm sure she will say yes. I'm sure she'd like the idea. So I'd like to reach out to her and just ask her about that. And, I wish you nothing but the best with that podcast. I think it is going to be amazing. Before we close, I want to ask you if you could speak to many people out there. Tish is saying, thank you for the great show. If you could speak to a prospective mom or dad that is filled with anxiety about whether or not they should or should not embark on this path of adoption, what would you want to say to them?
I would say go with your heart. Trust your heart. Trust your gut, but go with your heart. Whether you're about to give birth biologically or you're about to adopt, you're still going to have anxiety. We all do. Everybody does. But don't let it stop you. Don't let it stop you from creating a family that you're sharing your love with a child, whether it's a baby or an older child. There's a foster adopt program out there all over the country, all over the world, I believe. And it's like when you cut up a pie and people think, oh, if I take that piece, I'm taking it away from somebody else. No, what you're doing is enlarging it. Every time you do something from your heart, you're not taking something from the pie, you're enlarging the pie. And because you don't know who that person, how you're impacting them, I guess. I think it all comes from love. I'm not perfect. My husband's not perfect. My son's not perfect. But we love each other, and we grew that way, and do the best you can, but don't let it stop you. You're going to miss out on something wonderful. And I mean, I have had friends that I've talked to about this over the years, and of course it helps. They got to see us, but not everybody got to see us, and we are not the only people that have good stories. But I would talk to biological parents and adoptive parents, because the feeling when you pull it all together is still the same. You're creating a family. Choose it. Choose the one you want to have. But fear stops so many people from things. And again, the bad news stories that are out there have scared people. But a lot of those don't take place anymore. But unfortunately, not everybody knows that, especially, I'm I like to watch movies on the weekends, and you're still going to see sad things on the news. So that's life. Live it.
Mikki, that is phenomenal. I think that's a great note to end the show on. I love your positivity, and I know that your podcast on the Voice of America starting January is going to be absolutely, absolutely amazing. And I think that you will be a great voice to represent families that are chosen. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today. And to our amazing audience, I want to give Tish a shout out. She's been a great supporter of the show. So thank you very much for watching. To everyone else, whether you joined us over on LinkedIn, whether you watched on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn Live, thank you so much, Tish. On Facebook, it really doesn't matter where you're watching us from. Just thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to the stories. And so if you want to hear more author backstories as well as writing tips, join us again on Books with Bridgetti. The other show that I also host is called the Writer's Corner Live Show. That takes place every Tuesday at 11:30 Eastern and 17:30 South African time. So until next time, Mikki, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next show. Almost 3 billion people and counting are consuming video content on their devices. BeLive Media helps brands position their products and services to people at a time and manner that's convenient to them. If you would like to reach your customers and clients and stay ahead of your competitors, then connect with us.